Amazing viewers, before we go into this riveting narrative, drop your location in the comments below. We love connecting with you all around the world. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Let's hit 10,000 subscribers this month together. Your support means everything. The storm that changed everything. The night was merciless. Rain lashed against the pavement, forming glistening rivers on the empty streets. The wind howled through the city like a wounded animal, shaking trees, rattling windows, and making even the streetlights flicker like they were unsure if they could hold on. The world felt like it was being torn apart, yet amidst the chaos, one woman fought a silent battle more painful than any storm could ever be. Her name was Emma Carter, and tonight she was fighting not for herself, but for the life growing inside her. She staggered forward, clutching her swollen belly, her body convulsing with pain as another contraction ripped through her. Her breath came in ragged gasps, mixing with the wind's cruel whispers. Every step felt impossible, yet she forced herself forward, driven by a primal force stronger than pain, a mother's love. St. Matthew's Private Hospital stood ahead, its bright neon sign glowing like a lighthouse in the storm. To Emma, it was more than just a building. It was hope, salvation, and the only chance her baby had. But she was not prepared for what awaited her inside. A cruel welcome. Emma burst through the hospital's glass doors, bringing the storm with her. Cold wind followed her in, and droplets of rain slid off her drenched clothes onto the polished floor. The stark contrast between the sterile warmth of the hospital lobby and her shivering body only made her feel more out of place. For a moment, all eyes were on her. Doctors, nurses, patients in the waiting area. Whispers erupted. Some were concerned, others merely annoyed by the disruption. Behind the reception desk, a nurse in a pristine uniform glanced up from her paperwork. Her name tag read Mrs. Caldwell, but the way her face twisted in disapproval made her seem less like a healer and more like a gatekeeper deciding who was worthy of care. Emma staggered to the counter, her hands gripping it tightly as another contraction hit. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Please. I'm in labor. My water broke." Mrs. Caldwell's lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes scanned Emma's disheveled state, her wet hair clinging to her face, her cheap maternity dress sticking to her skin, the mud on her shoes. Emma had seen that look before. It was the look that rich women gave her when she worked as a waitress, the look that whispered, "You don't belong here." The nurse sighed heavily, as if Emma was a burden. "Do you have an appointment? This is a private hospital." Emma's fingers dug into the counter. My husband," she gasped, trying to catch her breath. "Liam Carter. He made arrangements, reserved a room. Please, just check." Before Mrs. Caldwell could respond, another nurse appeared. She was younger, her eyes filled with something Emma couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe. Compassion. "Let's get you to the maternity ward," the younger nurse said, pushing a wheelchair toward Emma. Relief flooded through her. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe she wasn't going to be treated like garbage tonight. But as they moved toward the elevators, a man in a white coat stepped in their path. Dr. Hensley, the hospital's chief obstetrician. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his custom-tailored lab coat screamed money, status, power. His sharp eyes took in Emma's appearance, not with concern, but calculation. He leaned in and whispered something to the young nurse. Whatever he said drained the kindness from her face. Emma knew in that moment they were sending her away. The forgotten room. Instead of taking her upstairs to the well-equipped maternity ward, the nurse wheeled Emma down a dimly lit hallway. With every turn, the walls became less pristine, the air colder, and the sterile scent of antiseptic gave way to something else. Dust. Paint. Neglect. Emma's heart pounded. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice thick with fear. The nurse didn't answer. They stopped at a door that had a renovation in progress sign taped to it. The nurse pushed the wheelchair inside and helped Emma onto a stiff cot that looked like it belonged in a storage room, not a hospital. Emma looked around, her breath catching in her throat. The walls were half-painted, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. There was no heart monitor, no IV stand, no proper medical equipment. A single flickering bulb buzzed overhead, casting eerie shadows. This isn't a delivery room," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "I need proper care. I was promised." The nurse looked away, avoiding her gaze. "This is all that's available," she said in a tone that wasn't unkind, but final. Emma felt hot tears well up in her eyes. "Please," she begged, "at least give me a proper bed." The nurse sighed and shifted on her feet. "We'll bring you supplies soon," she muttered before walking out. The door clicked shut behind her. And just like that, Emma was alone. Strength in solitude. She placed her trembling hands on her belly, whispering, "I'm sorry, baby. I promise, I'll keep you safe." Her contractions were getting worse. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the pain away. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She had planned a beautiful water birth, in a comfortable room, with Liam holding her hand. Now she was here, in a forgotten room. Minutes turned into an eternity. The sound of rain outside was the only thing keeping her sane. Her mind drifted back to Liam. He was supposed to be here. Where was he? She had called him earlier, but his secretary had said he was in an important meeting. A lump formed in her throat. Did he even know what was happening to her right now? Suddenly, the door creaked open. A different nurse walked in. She had cold, calculating eyes and held a clipboard. Without so much as a greeting, she said, "We need to check your dilation." Emma flinched as the nurse examined her with rough, careless hands. "You're at 6 centimeters," the nurse announced, standing abruptly. "It'll still be a while. Try to rest." "Wait," Emma called, her voice hoarse. I was promised a VIP suite. My husband." The nurse cut her off with a smirk. "VIP suite?" She scoffed. "Sweetheart, unless your husband owns this hospital, you're stuck here." Emma clenched her fists. They thought she was nobody. But they had no idea who she really was, because the man who was about to storm into this hospital in the next few hours would change everything. The breaking point. Emma Carter lay curled on the stiff cot, drenched in sweat, her body convulsing with pain. She was alone. The dim, flickering bulb overhead cast eerie shadows across the unfinished walls. The renovation dust thickened the air, making it harder to breathe. She could hear the distant beeping of heart monitors from the maternity ward, the place she was supposed to be. Instead, she was here, hidden away, treated like a burden, a problem no one wanted to deal with. She clenched her jaw as another contraction hit, a white-hot pain that tore through her like fire. 8 minutes apart now. It was happening faster than she had anticipated. Her breathing turned ragged, and she dug her nails into the thin blanket beneath her, trying to ground herself. Where was Liam? Had he even gotten her message? A fresh wave of frustration and panic coursed through her. She couldn't do this alone. The past that haunts. Pain had a way of unearthing old memories. Emma had spent her whole life fighting to be seen, to be valued. Growing up in a small town, she had learned quickly that society had a way of deciding who mattered and who didn't. She was the daughter of a single mother, a housekeeper who worked for the wealthy Carter family. She could still hear the whispers of the other staff members in the Carter estate. She'll never be anything more than a maid's daughter. She doesn't belong in their world. Atlas Carter deserves someone better. Yes, Atlas Carter. The boy she had grown up with, the heir to a fortune so vast it could buy entire cities. He had been the one person who never made her feel small. The one person who saw her, truly saw her. But Atlas had never wanted the wealth or the expectations that came with his name. When they were just kids, he had promised her, "One day, I'm going to build something of my own, Emma. Something that isn't tied to my family's money." And he had kept that promise. He had walked away from his family's empire, changed his name to Liam Carter, and started from scratch, building a business with his own hands. He had chosen Emma despite everything, despite the disapproval, the obstacles. They had fought for their love. And now, Emma was fighting for something even greater, their child. But where was he? She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to stay strong. She couldn't afford to break. Not now. A nurse with a secret. The door creaked open again, and Emma's body tensed. Another nurse stepped in, younger than the others, her brown eyes filled with hesitation. Emma recognized her. Clara. She was the only one who had shown her a shred of kindness earlier. Clara walked to Emma's bedside and gently placed a cold compress against her forehead. "You're burning up," she murmured. Emma swallowed hard. "Please," she gasped, gripping Clara's wrist weakly. I can't stay here. I was promised a room." Clara hesitated, glancing toward the closed door. Her hands trembled slightly, as if she knew she was about to do something dangerous. "They told me not to help you," she whispered. "That you don't belong here." Emma's stomach twisted, but she wasn't surprised. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Clara bit her lip, her eyes darting toward the door again. Then, as if making a decision, she leaned in and whispered, "It's about your husband." Emma's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Clara exhaled, choosing her words carefully. "Dr. Hensley, he thinks you're lying about who you are. The nurses, the staff, they all think you're just some woman off the streets making up stories about having a rich husband. They don't want to waste resources on you in case you can't pay." Emma's heart pounded in disbelief. They thought she was a fraud. Her vision blurred, not just from the pain, but from sheer rage. Clara reached into her pocket and discreetly pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Your husband's assistant called back," she whispered. "I overheard the conversation. Your husband is on his way. And when he gets here—" Her voice trailed off. But the meaning was clear. The people who had mistreated Emma would regret it. Emma exhaled shakily, her anger turning into quiet, steel-like determination. They had underestimated her. They had judged her by her appearance, dismissed her like she was nothing. But she had fought her whole life to prove she was more than what people assumed. And this was just one more battle she would win. The breaking point. Clara stood to leave, but before she could reach the door, another contraction hit. This one was different. Stronger. Sharper. Emma gasped, her body tensing as pain tore through her like a jagged knife. It wasn't supposed to be this fast. Clara spun around, eyes wide. Emma's head fell back against the pillow. "It's happening," she choked out. "The baby's coming." Clara paled. I need to get a doctor," she stammered, backing toward the door. "Stay here. I'll—" She didn't finish her sentence because, at that exact moment, the door slammed open. And standing there, drenched from the storm, his hazel eyes burning with fury, was Liam Carter. The room felt like it had frozen in time. The nurses who had ignored Emma, the ones who had sneered at her, stood motionless outside the door, their faces pale with horror. Liam took one look at Emma, her sweat-soaked skin, the pain contorting her face, the unfinished room that reeked of dust and neglect. And something inside him snapped. His voice was dangerously quiet when he spoke. "Who put my wife in this room?" No one answered. Liam stepped forward, his sharp gaze locking onto Dr. Hensley, who had just entered the hallway, looking suddenly very nervous. "I asked a question," Liam said, his voice lethal. "Who put my wife here?" Dr. Hensley cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. There was a misunderstanding. Liam's fist slammed into the wall, making everyone flinch. "A misunderstanding," he repeated, his voice shaking with controlled fury. "You dumped my pregnant wife into a goddamn construction site, treated her like garbage, and you call it a misunderstanding. Emma, despite the unbearable pain, felt something warm bloom in her chest. He had come. She had never doubted he would. Liam turned to Clara, the only nurse who had tried to help. "Call the head of this hospital," he ordered. "Right now." Clara nodded and rushed out. Then Liam turned back to the others. "And someone," he snarled, "get my wife a proper room. Now." The storm within. The silence in the hallway was deafening. Liam Carter stood at the doorway, his presence sucking the air out of the room. He wasn't just angry, he was volcanic. The nurses and staff who had dismissed Emma moments ago now shrank back, avoiding his gaze. Even Dr. Hensley, the man who had orchestrated this cruelty, seemed to have lost his earlier arrogance. Emma, still writhing in pain, barely had the strength to lift her head, but she saw the transformation happening before her eyes. The people who had treated her as nothing, they were afraid. Because now, they knew. They had underestimated her. They had assumed she was some desperate woman begging for charity. But her husband was Liam Carter, a man who had built an empire from nothing, a man who owned the very board members these doctors answered to. And now he was out for blood. Get her out of here. Now. Clara, the only nurse who had shown kindness, was the first to break the tense silence. "I'll arrange for a proper room," she said quickly, moving to Emma's bedside. "We need to move her now. She's progressing too fast." But Dr. Hensley suddenly found his voice, clearing his throat. "Mr. Carter, we..." Liam turned on him with a look so lethal that the older doctor flinched. "Shut up." Dr. Hensley swallowed hard. "Who authorized this?" Liam demanded, his voice a blade slicing through the air. "Who decided that my pregnant wife, the woman carrying my child, should be tossed into a room not even fit for a dying animal?" The entire floor seemed to hold its breath. No one answered. Liam's hands clenched into fists. "You think this hospital runs without consequences? You think I won't have every single one of you fired?" "Liam," Emma gasped weakly, her body trembling as another contraction ripped through her. His fury vanished in an instant, replaced by pure concern. He was at her side in 2 strides, kneeling next to her cot. His strong hands cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so damn sorry." Emma's lips quivered. They thought I was lying about you." A muscle in Liam's jaw twitched. That was all it took. He stood, turning toward the stunned hospital staff. His voice was quiet but deadly. "Not only will I make sure every one of you loses your jobs, but I'll ensure that you never work in this field again. Mark my words, your licenses, your reputations, everything you've built, gone." Dr. Hensley paled. "Please, Mr. Carter, we can." "You can what?" Liam snapped. "Apologize? Fix it. You had your chance." He turned to Clara. "Move her now." Without hesitation, Clara and 2 trembling nurses rushed to wheel Emma out of the room. Liam followed closely, his eyes still burning with the fire of a man who had been pushed too far. The VIP suite that came too late. The moment they entered the real maternity ward, the difference was staggering. Here, the walls gleamed. The lighting was warm, comforting. Machines beeped softly, and the air smelled of sterile safety rather than dust and decay. They pushed Emma into a luxurious suite, one with plush seating, soft lighting, and an advanced birthing setup. The room she had been promised. The room she should have been in all along. As the nurses transferred her to a proper bed, Emma barely registered their whispers, the sudden shift in their behavior. Now, they were attentive. Now, they were apologetic. Now, they treated her like she mattered, because her husband had shown up. Emma's fingers clenched around the hospital sheets. Rage burned inside her. It shouldn't have taken Liam's presence for them to care. She was a human being, a mother-to-be. Did she only deserve respect because she was married to a powerful man? She swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat. Right now, she needed to focus on her baby. The pain before the miracle. A doctor, a new one, hurried inside, his expression one of genuine concern. "Mrs. Carter, we're checking your progress," he announced, slipping on gloves. Liam stayed right by her side, gripping her hand tightly. Emma bit her lip as the doctor examined her. "She's fully dilated," the doctor said, looking up with urgency. "We need to get ready to deliver now." Emma's eyes widened. She wasn't ready. But nature didn't care. The contractions were unbearable, the pressure intense. Sweat dripped down her temples as she fought the overwhelming pain. "Baby, I'm here," Liam whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." Tears slid down Emma's cheeks. She had waited for this moment for so long. But now, all she could think about was how close she had come to giving birth in a dust-filled, unfinished room. She locked eyes with Liam. "Promise me something. Anything. Make them pay." Liam's fingers tightened around hers. "Consider it done." And then, with one final, agonizing push, a baby's cry pierced the air. The moment that changed everything. Emma's body sagged in exhaustion as the doctor lifted their baby, a tiny, perfect little girl. Liam's breath caught. His fierce, ruthless expression melted away, replaced by raw emotion. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch his daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered. Emma let out a soft, breathless laugh. "She is." The doctor gently placed the baby on Emma's chest, and the moment their skin touched, Emma knew every bit of suffering had been worth it. Her daughter. Her world. Liam leaned down, kissing Emma's forehead, then their baby's tiny hand. "I swear on my life," he murmured, "no one will ever mistreat either of you again." Emma closed her eyes, this time not from pain, but from peace. She had survived. She had won. And now, the people who had wronged her, they would answer for it. The reckoning begins. The world outside St. Matthew's Hospital was still drowning in rain, but inside the private maternity suite, all of that chaos faded into insignificance. Emma Carter lay exhausted but victorious, her newborn daughter resting against her chest, warm and safe. The pain, the fear, the humiliation, none of it mattered in this moment. She had fought through every injustice, every agonizing contraction, every degrading word, and she had won. But this wasn't over. As Liam Carter sat beside her, his hazel eyes filled with emotion, something darker flickered beneath the surface, cold, calculated fury. Emma felt the heat of it even through her exhaustion. "You're still angry," she murmured weakly. Liam's fingers brushed over their daughter's tiny hand. "Of course I'm angry." His voice was quiet, controlled. But his rage was far from gone. "They left you in that hellhole of a room. If I hadn't come in time." He cut himself off, his jaw tightening. Emma's heart ached for him, but she wasn't about to ask him to let this go, because she wouldn't let it go either. She had begged for help and been discarded like she was nothing. The people who had sworn an oath to care for others had seen her as less than human, all because they thought she wasn't important enough to be treated with dignity. She looked into her husband's eyes and whispered, "Make them regret it." Liam exhaled slowly. That was already guaranteed. Emma knew Liam. When he made a promise, he kept it. And now, Liam Carter was out for blood. The confrontation. An hour later, while Emma and the baby rested, Liam Carter stepped into the main hallway of the hospital. The storm outside had finally calmed, but inside, the storm was just beginning. He walked with quiet confidence, his dark coat still damp from the rain, his every step echoing in the sterile corridors. Hospital staff turned their heads as he passed, some whispering, some outright avoiding his gaze. They knew they had messed up. Dr. Hensley was waiting for him near the nurse's station, his expression carefully blank. But Liam saw the way his fingers twitched at his sides, the way his shoulders were slightly hunched, as if bracing for impact. "Mr. Carter," Dr. Hensley started, his voice a shade too smooth. "I'm so relieved to hear that your wife and child are doing well." Liam stopped in front of him, staring him down like he was a bug that needed to be crushed. "You don't get to pretend you care now." The smile flickered from Dr. Hensley's face. There was a miscommunication. Some of the staff didn't understand the situation. Liam chuckled. It wasn't a friendly sound. "Miscommunication." His voice was dangerously soft. "You mean the part where you dumped my pregnant wife into a renovation zone? Where your nurses mocked her and treated her like garbage?" The doctor's face turned red. "Mr. Carter, please, I can assure you." "I don't need assurances," Liam interrupted coldly. "I need accountability." Behind them, other doctors, nurses, and hospital administrators had gathered, sensing the storm that was about to hit. Even Clara, the one nurse who had tried to help, stood nearby, watching with cautious hope in her eyes. Liam turned to Mrs. Caldwell, the receptionist who had sneered at Emma when she first arrived. "And you," he said icily. Mrs. Caldwell flinched. "You didn't even check if my wife had an appointment," Liam said. "You looked at her and decided she wasn't worthy of being here." Mrs. Caldwell opened her mouth, but no words came out. Liam stepped forward, his voice carrying through the entire corridor. "How many other women have you treated like this?" Silence. Liam let the question hang there. Let the shame settle in. Finally, he turned back to Dr. Hensley. "You run this hospital. You let this happen under your watch." Dr. Hensley swallowed. "We. You let your staff judge a woman by her appearance instead of treating her like a patient." Liam's voice was razor sharp. "Tell me, doctor, would Emma have received proper care if she had walked in wearing designer clothes? If she had looked like someone's rich wife?" Dr. Hensley had no answer. Liam gave a slow, humorless smile. "That's what I thought." The fall of a hospital. Liam took his phone from his pocket and made a single call. "Mr. Carter," Dr. Hensley started, sweat forming at his temple. Let's talk about this." Liam held up a hand, silencing him. A moment later, footsteps echoed down the hall. A team of lawyers in tailored suits entered the hospital, their expressions unreadable. Dr. Hensley visibly paled. "As of this moment," Liam said, slipping his phone back into his pocket, "I'm filing a lawsuit against this hospital for medical negligence, patient endangerment, and discrimination." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Liam folded his arms. "And if you think my lawyers won't rip this place apart in court, you're gravely mistaken." Dr. Hensley's breath came fast and shallow. "Mr. Carter, this will destroy us." Liam tilted his head. "You destroyed yourselves." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "We'll begin an immediate investigation into the hospital's practices. Depending on our findings, you can expect lawsuits, regulatory reviews, and possible revocation of licenses." Dr. Hensley swayed slightly, as if the ground had been yanked out from under him. Mrs. Caldwell gripped the desk so tightly her knuckles turned white. Liam turned to Clara, the only nurse who had helped Emma. His expression softened. "You." Clara straightened. "You were the only one who treated my wife with kindness," Liam said. "If you ever need a recommendation or a better job, you come to me. I take care of people who do the right thing." Clara's eyes shone with emotion. She gave a small nod, standing a little taller. Liam turned back to Dr. Hensley. "I'll make sure the public knows what happened here. The media, the medical board, everyone. This hospital won't just lose its reputation." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a chilling whisper. "You'll lose everything." Dr. Hensley let out a strangled breath, his skin a sickly shade of gray. Liam didn't spare him another glance. He turned on his heel, walking back toward his wife and daughter. His family. This was only the beginning. They would never forget the night Liam Carter walked into this hospital, and they would regret it for the rest of their lives. The power of justice and redemption. The weight of the night's events still clung to the air inside Street Matthews Private Hospital. The corridors were no longer filled with whispers of judgment, but instead an overwhelming silence, the kind that comes before a storm wipes away everything in its path. Liam Carter had made sure of that. Word had already spread. Hospital staff scrambled. Administrators whispered frantically in private meetings, and Dr. Hensley sat in his office, his career unraveling with each passing minute. But in the maternity suite, in the sanctuary where Emma Carter lay with her newborn daughter in her arms, the world felt different. Here, there was peace. Here, there was love. Here, a family had fought against injustice, and won. The first moments of forever. Emma stirred, her body exhausted beyond words, but a soft cry made her open her eyes. Her baby. She glanced to the side and found Liam sitting next to the bed, holding their daughter with an expression that melted every bit of steel he had worn earlier. Liam Carter, the man who had walked into this hospital like a thunderstorm and torn through those who had wronged her, was now cradling their tiny daughter like she was the most delicate treasure in the world. Emma's throat tightened. "Hey," Liam whispered, his eyes lifting to meet hers. A warmth spread through his expression, replacing the fury that had controlled him earlier. "Hey," she murmured, trying to push herself up. Liam was by her side in an instant, carefully helping her sit up. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice softer now, filled with the kind of tenderness only a husband could have for his wife. Emma let out a small, tired chuckle. "Like I just survived a war." Liam's jaw clenched, his gaze darkening again. "You shouldn't have had to." Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it. "But I did." She looked down at their daughter, who was now sucking on her tiny fingers. "We did." Liam exhaled, leaning his forehead against hers. "I swear, Emma. I swear on my life. You will never go through something like that again." "I know." And she did. Because Liam Carter never broke his promises. The fall of Street Matthews. While Emma rested, Liam made a final call. By morning, the hospital was in chaos. Reporters gathered outside. News headlines blared the scandal. St. Matthews Private Hospital under fire for medical negligence and discrimination. We healthy businessman's pregnancy forced into abandoned room. Hospital staff now under investigation. Hospital executives SQRMBLE as legal action looms. The public was furious. Patients and families who had once been ignored came forward, sharing their stories of mistreatment at the hands of the hospital. More lawsuits were filed. Within weeks, Street Matthews lost its prestige, its funding, and finally, its doors were forced to shut. Emma wasn't surprised. Liam had told her once that powerful men don't have to scream to be feared. Sometimes, all it took was one well-placed storm to bring a corrupt empire to its knees. Redemption and a new beginning. A month after giving birth, Emma was sitting on their private balcony, the morning sun kissing her skin as she cradled her daughter. A soft breeze rustled the garden below, filling the air with the scent of fresh roses. Their home was quiet, peaceful, nothing like that night in the hospital. Liam walked outside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her before sitting beside her, stretching his long legs out as he stared at the sleeping baby in her arms. "She looks like you," he murmured, reaching out to gently trace a finger over their daughter's tiny nose. Emma smiled. "You think so?" Liam nodded. "She's got your strength, your fire." He smirked slightly. "But that glare she gave me when I woke her up earlier, definitely mine." Emma laughed softly, but then her expression turned thoughtful. "Liam. "I've been thinking." She glanced at him. "That nurse, Clara, the one who helped me." Liam's gaze sharpened with interest. "What about her?" Emma hesitated, then said, "She shouldn't have to work in a place like that ever again. She was the only one who treated me like a human being. The only one who cared." Liam sat back, considering. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "I happen to know a few hospitals that could use someone like her," he said. "Or, better yet," he glanced at Emma, "what if we do more?" Emma frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Liam's lips curved into that dangerous, brilliant smile that had made him a legend in the business world. "What if we don't just help Clara?" he said. "What if we create something better? A foundation for women who are ignored, mistreated, or cast aside. A place where they get the medical care they deserve, no matter who they are." Emma's heart stopped for a moment. Then it started beating faster. "You mean a hospital?" she breathed. Liam nodded. "Why not? We have the money, the influence, and I know you, Emma. You won't be able to walk away from what happened at Street Matthews without doing something to make sure it never happens again." Emma stared at him. A month ago, she had been crying in a dust-filled room, begging for help. Now she was sitting beside her husband, about to change the world. Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you." Liam cupped her face, his expression soft and unguarded for the first time in weeks. "I love you more." Then he leaned down, kissing her the way he always did, like she was the best decision he had ever made. And as their daughter let out a tiny yawn, Emma knew. This wasn't just the end of their story. It was the beginning of something far greater. The legacy of a fighter. Months later, the doors to the Carter Foundation Women's Hospital officially opened. It wasn't just a hospital, it was a promise. A promise that no woman, no mother, no human being would ever be turned away because of how they looked, where they came from, or what they could afford. It was a place where dignity was not a privilege, but a right. And it all began with one night. One night of suffering. One night of injustice. One night that turned a mother into a warrior, and a husband into a storm that shattered corruption. And in the center of it all, a child who would one day learn the story of how her parents changed the world. Because Emma Carter wasn't just a woman who had survived. She was a woman who had fought. And because of her, thousands of others would never have to. The story that changed everything. A soft wind rustled through the trees outside, casting gentle shadows against the walls of the Carter Foundation Women's Hospital. The state-of-the-art facility stood tall, its gleaming glass windows reflecting the golden hues of a setting sun. Inside, a nurse walked down the pristine hallways, her steps brisk but purposeful. She had just finished a long shift, but exhaustion didn't weigh her down. Not today. Today was different, because today she had witnessed something remarkable. A woman, pregnant, drenched in sweat, her face tight with pain, had been wheeled in through the emergency entrance earlier that morning. She had been terrified, alone, desperate, and yet no one had turned her away. The moment she arrived, doctors and nurses surrounded her with warmth and care. No questions about her insurance, no judgment about her appearance, only compassion. And now, as the nurse passed by the newborn nursery, she glanced inside and saw the woman, now a mother, gazing at her newborn child with tears of joy. The nurse smiled, because that was the legacy of Emma Carter, a woman who had once walked into a hospital and been cast aside, a woman who had once been mocked, dismissed, and forced to fight for her dignity, a woman who had endured suffering but refused to let it define her. Now, because of her, thousands of women had a place where they were seen, where they mattered, where no one was ever left behind. The nurse sighed contentedly and stepped outside, letting the evening breeze wash over her. As she did, she caught sight of two figures standing on the hospital's rooftop garden, a man and a woman, silhouetted against the sky. Emma and Liam Carter, their daughter, now a few months old, rested in Emma's arms, her tiny hands reaching toward the sky, as if she knew she was part of something greater than herself. Liam stood beside them, one hand resting on his wife's waist, the other gently stroking his daughter's cheek. They weren't speaking, but they didn't have to. They had already said everything that mattered. Their love, their fight, their triumph. It was written in every brick of this hospital. It was written in every woman who walked through these doors and was treated with kindness. It was written in the stories that would be told for generations to come. Emma glanced down at her daughter and smiled. "One day," she whispered, "I'll tell you the story of the night you were born." Liam chuckled softly. "And I'll tell you how your mom became a warrior." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "We did it, Liam." Liam pressed a kiss to her forehead. "No," he murmured. "We just got started." Above them, the first stars of the evening began to twinkle, as if the universe itself was watching, witnessing, the story of a family who had turned pain into power. A story that would never be forgotten. The end, but also the beginning. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.